that's not rowdy enough. Can we at least cheer for the Cyclones? Like, what a win over Baylor. I mean, that's just fun. I am such a college football, college basketball girl that, you know, this is the time when I think it's the most fun. I'm not a big pro football, pro basketball fan. I think they get paid too much and it's not as scrappy. So I like the scrappy stuff. But Cyclones brought it today. It's going to be fun to watch them. It's great to be here. I want to thank Brett. I want to thank the Henry family and this beautiful farm. So I grew up in South Carolina playing on a farm. My friend was, her and her family had a cotton farm. My godmother had a dairy farm. And so in rural South Carolina, that was something you were very used to. I was born and raised in a small rural town in South Carolina. 2 stoplights. You couldn't think about doing something wrong without somebody telling your mom. But we were the only Indian family in that small southern town. We weren't white enough to be white. We weren't black enough to be black. They didn't know who we were, what we were, or why we were there. And my mom would say when I would get teased on the playground, she would say, your job is not to show them how you're different. Your job is to show them how you're similar, which is what we all need to be remembering right now. And even though the town didn't know who my parents were or why they were there, my parents knew why they were there. Because there wasn't a day they didn't remind my brothers, my sister, and me how blessed we were to live in America. My mom started a business out of the living room of our home. I started doing the books for our family business when I was 13. It wasn't until later that I realized that was child labor. But I learned the value of a dollar. Because when times were tough, we stretched that dollar. We got creative and we made it work. And when times were good, we didn't celebrate because we knew the bad times were going to happen again. I did not go to the Ivy League schools like you're going to see some of the other candidates come through here. I went to a public school. I went to Clemson University, go Tigers. They elected me and I got to work. And what we saw in South Carolina is a lot of legislation was passed on a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. But one day, they passed a bill that would give legislators a pay raise. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, silence. The ayes have it. Yet to this day, you can't find one legislator that says they voted themselves a pay raise. I was so upset. We had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, Republican governor. And I was so upset, I went to the speaker and I said, this is why people don't trust us. And I filed a bill that said anything important enough to be debated on the floor of the House or the Senate is important enough for the people to know how their legislators voted. And the speaker told me to put the bill away. We didn't need to have it. They would decide what the public needed to see and what they did. I didn't need to wait and see who else was getting in. I'm not scared of anybody or anything. It was, we've got a country to save, bless you. And so, what I'm telling you is, think about where we are in our country today. It's rough. It's bad. You look at our economy. We are $31 trillion in debt. We are borrowing money just to make our interest payments. As governor, I always had to balance a budget. In your households, you always have to balance a budget. In your businesses, you always have to balance a budget. You don't spend more than you have, right? That's not what's happening in DC. And don't let anybody tell you that Republicans and Democrats don't agree on anything, because they love to waste your money. Let's not forget, Republicans started this. You look at inflation, you look at what's happened, what did the Republicans do? When COVID hit, Republicans and Democrats passed a $2.2 trillion bailout. It passed the House 419-6. It passed the Senate 96-0. What they did was they basically gave all this money away, no accountability. They expanded welfare. We now have 90 million people on Medicaid. We have 42 million people on food stamps. And then what did Republicans do? they decided after 10 years to open back up earmarks. $2 billion was given to counties that don't even exist or have government structures. Figure that one out. $7 million for horse racing in Arizona. $12 million for a baseball stadium in New York. $15 million for New Jersey to get the World Cup. $6.5 million for golf courses in Colorado. $20 billion with a B for welfare for illegal immigrants. It's not okay. And yet, what's happening? 1 in 6 Americans can't pay their utility bill? 60% of Americans are in credit card debt? 50% of Americans are saying that they're not as stable as they were a year ago? There's a spending problem in DC. They are addicted to it. And they've forgotten that it's our money. So they spend it like there's no end to it. But let me tell you something. Our kids and grandkids are never going to forgive us for this if we don't fix it. Then you go and you look at education. Everybody likes to blame it on COVID. We had a problem with education before COVID. Did you know pre-COVID, 70% of 8th graders in our country were not proficient in reading? Think about that. 66% of 8th graders were not proficient in math. Then you go and you add 2 years of closings, and our kids are in a world of hurt. I don't know how we're going to catch them back up. But yet, everybody wants to talk about all of these woke things, right? You've got 90% of our kids right now under critical race theory, which basically tells a little girl if she goes into kindergarten, if she's white, she's bad, and if she's brown or black, she's never going to be good enough and she's always going to be a victim. Everybody was up in arms about the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, right? And it basically said you can't talk about gender before the 3rd grade. I don't think that goes far enough. When I was in school, you didn't have sex ed until 7th grade. And even then, your parent had to sign a permission slip. And my dad wouldn't sign it, so I was the uncool kid in the classroom next door. That's not the role of schools, that's the role of parents. Parents should be making the decisions about this. That's something that's decided between families and churches. That's not something decided in classrooms. We don't need to have that happen. So you look at the school situation, the number of homeschoolers in our country multiplied times 5. The majority of them were African Americans. Why? There was no place for them to go. And they knew they weren't getting what they needed out of the school system. Then you go and you look at crime on our streets. Every single state, every single city you look, and people are scared to go to dinner. They don't believe that their kids are safe if they ride their bike down the street. We have to bring law and order back. We have to have the backs of our law enforcement. We have to have the numbers of our criminals. And we have to tell our district attorneys that they have to prosecute these crimes and make examples of these people so that it stops. And then you look at the border. I mean, did you ever think millions of people coming across that border? There's been enough fentanyl crossing the border that would kill every single American. But no one's doing anything about it. They've got open borders altogether. And now, do you see what happened with the cartels? Those were South Carolinians. They were from my state that were killed. It's total lawlessness. And then you look at our foreign policy. Did you ever think that Americans would look to the sky and see a Chinese spy balloon looking back at them? It was a national embarrassment. How much more are we going to take? And yet, what did we do? We gave $46 billion in foreign aid last year. Do you want to know who we gave it to? Iraq, which is now being infiltrated by the Iranians who say death to America every day. We've given the money back to Pakistan again, who used to harbor terrorists that would kill our soldiers. Zimbabwe, the most anti-African, anti-American African country we have. Belarus, holding hands with Russia, yet we gave them money. Communist China, we said that they were a state sponsor of terrorism, and we're giving them money. We're giving money to China. We can't keep going like this. So, that's a lot of bad news. It's a lot of stuff you know, but this is what I'm gonna say. That's the end of it. Let's stop complaining about it. Let's stop whining about it. There's been enough of that. And let's say, all right, how are we gonna fix it? So now no more talking about our problems, we're gonna talk about solutions. What do we do with the economy? Stop the spending. Make sure that we call out Republicans and Democrats when they spend. I will veto every bill that doesn't take us back to the spending levels pre-COVID. Then you go and you claw back the $500 billion in COVID money that they never spent. Let's get that back. $100 billion was fraud from the COVID stimulus. Don't send the IRS on these Americans, innocent Americans. Instead, go after that COVID fraud. That's $100 billion. Let's do that. 15% of our federal budget is interest. Quit borrowing money. Tear up the credit cards and say, we're not going to do it anymore. It's a national security threat when you devalue your dollars like that. And then, yes, we're going to do something with entitlements. But this is the thing. My husband and I take care of my parents. They're in their 80s. Ask them what they need. Let's bring people based on talent. Talent that's going to fuel our businesses, not just numbers and random people. When it's done on merit, that's when you're making our country stronger and better. That's the way forward on immigration. And with foreign policy, we'll do exactly what I did at the UN. We'll have the backs of our allies, but we will hold our enemies to account. We will no longer give money to countries that hate America. We will make sure we let China know that we're on to them. We will call them out for the fentanyl they're sending over because they know exactly what they're doing. We will call them out for COVID because think about what that country did. When they knew they had COVID, they closed their borders to anyone coming in and they opened their borders so that all of their people could go out because they didn't want to be the only country embarrassed. Think about that. We call them out on that. We make sure they stop stealing intellectual property. We strengthen our military because a strong military doesn't start wars. A strong military prevents wars. Other than what they're doing now, which, by the way, our military are taking gender pronoun classes. That's not what we need our military to do. And when we start to focus on real foreign policy that lets countries know what we expect of them, all of a sudden it's not reactionary anymore. So those are the solutions we deal with there. But the one overarching thing that we have to fix, above all things, is this national self-loathing that has happened in our country. The idea that people say America's bad or rotten or racist. I was the first female minority governor elected in history. America's not a racist country, we're a blessed country. And our kids need to know that. We need to go back to loving America. We need to go back to understanding this is the best country in the world. I've been around the world and back. I can vouch for it 10 times over. We need to stop the socialism creep. Socialism has never worked in any country it's ever been tried. And we need to go back to capitalism and making sure that anybody can be anything without government getting in the way. We go back to saying, what's the role of government? Government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never intended to be all things to all people. And when we do that, I will tell you, there will be a change in America. To do it, we need a new course. We need a new generation. Because we've got new generational issues that we're dealing with. That means we are going to make sure that we push for term limits in America. We've got to have it. We've got to have it in Congress. You've got it in other places. We should have it in Congress. We're going to make sure we have mental competency tests for people over the age of 75. Ridiculous. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. Let me tell you, I'm not being you want to do it over the age of 50? That's fine too. And by the way, I am in my prime. Don't let anybody tell you. The reason you have mental competency tests is because you want to know that those people making decisions on national security, on the future of our economy, on those issues with kids and education. You want to know they're at the top of their game. That's the point of that. It's not for one person, it's for everybody. But you can't look at Joe Biden 2 years ago and tell me that's the same Joe Biden today. We need to have that for everybody. And when we go in that new direction, when we go with that new generational change, the bigger thing that we do is we leave the drama in the past. We leave the baggage in the past. We leave the status quo in the past. And we say, now we're going to right the ship. Do you remember when you were growing up, how simple life was? I make sure we're doing everything we can. But the way I look at it is they have gone overboard with all of these green bills that they're passing, green money they're giving away, all of these corporate welfare things that they're tying to green energy. What I will tell you is the U.S. does a good job in reducing emissions. Compare us to anybody in the world. If you care about the environment, if you want to really do something about the environment, then we need to get on to China and India and Saudi Arabia, who's not doing anything. The reason I got us out of the Paris Climate Agreement at the UN wasn't because I didn't think America was good at all the energy issues that we do, that we're not constantly trying to reduce emissions on our own because we think it's the right thing to do. It's because when Obama had put all these regulations down on the US, and what was China's role in that? They said they would start in 10 years. After dealing with China, 10 years never comes. India wasn't doing anything. India just had this summit on the environment. Well, if they had a summit on the environment, they need to do something about it. So yes, we will always work on different energy solutions. I want us to open up the energy industry. I can tell you, I don't want us getting dirty oil from Venezuela. I don't want us going hat in hand to Saudi Arabia. I want us to look at every sector of energy we have and say, how can we make it the best? How can we do it right for Americans? But how can we make sure that we're not being extreme? That's the key, is to make sure we do it right so that everybody benefits. But always hold those countries account and don't let them lecture us. We can go and lecture them. Yes, sir.
I'm a corn farmer 30 miles west of here, but 55% of our corn goes into making ethanol. We feel it's a very important part of our whole energy sector, plus it's by far the cleanest fuel that we could buy. I just want to know what you're going to do to try to promote more of them. What we would like to see is the car companies going back to more flex fuel cars and not putting all of their money into electric cars. We've got the fuel here, it's cleaner. We want to hear what you think. We really feel that's what we need.
Look, I mean, I think ethanol has proven that it's cleaner, right? And I think that the main question that keeps coming up about ethanol is, do you want to continue with the subsidies, right? That's the real question everybody wants to talk about. And what I'll say is, I'm not a girl that loves bailouts. I don't like corporate bailouts. I don't like any of that. But I'm not going to do anything to take away ethanol subsidies if you're not taking away oil and gas subsidies. So as long as those are there, we're going to make sure that everybody has it. Ethanol is proven to be clean. And so we need to let it happen. And when it comes to, a lot of people are also going to mention China and what they buy. And I will tell you that everything we do with China needs to be from a national security lens. I don't care if we buy t-shirts and light bulbs from China any more than I care if China buys agricultural products from our farmers, because it's not a national security threat. So no, I think that we are going to always work to help you with the ethanol, and as long as oil and gas producers are getting theirs, we're not going to go and take away from yours.
Can you get more flex fuel vehicles, you think?
I mean, look, we have to go and stop this whole electric car situation. I mean, first they go and they give $7,500 discount to people to get electric cars, and they're like, oh wait, we don't have the chargers. Like, all of it has kind of crept into this bigger issue. So, look, what I think we need to do is stop dictating that from a government perspective. That's not our place, and start letting the market work.
think we've lost a lot of civility in politics. If you have a Twitter, how will you use it to promote a positive America?
I do have a Twitter. You can go sign up on it now. First of all, I can tell you will get music from time to time because I love music. You will hear about the shows that I'm watching, but then other things. Look, I think let's first take social media into account because you brought that up. I want to talk about that, and then we'll go into civility. The problem with big tech is when social media, we've opened that can of worms, right? And when we did, what did big tech do? They said, oh, but you can't hold us liable because it's freedom of speech. And they were right. So they passed Section 230 to say these tech companies can't be held liable. The problem is those tech companies changed the rules on us. And they suddenly decided who was good and who was bad. And they suddenly decided what was real and what wasn't. And when they took that freedom away, that gave us the right that we need to go back to them and say, you don't play by those rules anymore, and we need to go to them. When we do that, what we should ask tech companies to do is show us their algorithms. Transparency fixes all things. Show us your algorithms, show us what you push, show us how you push it, and let the world see it. Secondly, we need to get rid of the bots. And the reason everybody should verify who they are, you shouldn't have to buy a blue check mark. Everybody should have to verify who they are. Because a lot of these bots are Russians and Chinese and Iranians, and they are trying to separate us and divide us on race and other topics. That's what they're doing. That's why we want the bots to go away. And not only that, the civility comes back when you're tweeting something with your own face and your own name, and you know your neighbors and your pastor are going to see it. That's when you get that back in social media. So we've got to go back to that. In terms of the civility otherwise, look, I think it's really important that Republicans remember we have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That means we're doing something wrong. We should not be proud of that. We should want to win a majority of Americans. And the way you win a majority of Americans is our solutions are the right ones, because we lift up everybody, not just a select few. But the way we communicate it matters. We should want to go and engage the Hispanic community. We should want to engage the Jewish community. We should want to engage the Asian community. We should want to engage more women. We should want to engage African Americans. And we can do it because I did it in South Carolina. You don't go to them and say you should be with us. You go to them and say, what do you care about? Guess what? They all care about their kids' education. They all care about their kids having opportunities that they didn't have. They all want a safe America that's strong abroad. Our goal should be showing a national purpose. And we don't do it, let me tell you, you don't do it with faint hearts, and you don't do it with watered down compromises. You don't have to compromise. You do it with a national purpose that is good and true, and ask your opponents to join you. That's how we win. That's what we'll do. When we get back to that, that's when we'll go back to how we lived growing up and get back to that place. I have faith. I think we can do it. It's going to take all of us to make it happen, but I do think we can do it.
What I'm doing about drug pricing, like the cost of EpiPens, the cost of insulin.
So, in the Medicare Advantage situation, that was in dealing with entitlements, Medicare, Social Security. When it comes to health care, the only way to fix it is to break it. And that's exactly what we're going to have to do. First of all, I will tell you, doctors don't give you those 10 tests because they want to. They do it for the 90% chance they'll get sued. So do what we did in South Carolina and pass tort reform around this country so that people can go and sue us. The second thing is, if you've ever heard of certificate of need, it is this ridiculous clause that basically says if you have a hospital here, there can't be another hospital within a certain amount of miles. And it's protectionism. In South Carolina, I got rid of certificate of need, and I said competition is good, because if you go and you have hospitals close to each other, guess what they're going to do? They're going to fight for your business. They're going to make sure the quality is good. They're going to make sure their prices are better. We need to do that. So we need to make sure that all of certificates of need, that we open this up to competition. Then the biggest thing that will fix healthcare is we need to make every industry transparent, from the hospitals, to the doctor's offices, to the insurance companies, to the pharmaceutical companies. They need to start showing us everything. It is unthinkable that a person gets a hospital bill that was negotiated between the hospital and the insurance company, and they had nothing to do with it. Like I said, we take care of my parents. They're both in their 80s. My mom just got out of the hospital. Why is it that when you go take your car to get fixed, they give you a full estimate of what it's going to cost, and you decide what you want? Why doesn't that happen in a hospital? If my mom doesn't want the $50 Tylenol, why does she have to take it? Why are you going to charge her for it anyway? When all of a sudden we expose every one of these, that's when we'll fix it. Why is it that people have to go to Canada to get their medicines? Because it's so expensive here. When we suddenly open it up and we tell the healthcare industry, the rules have changed, we've got to see everything you're doing, you will be amazed at how they just open up and start reducing things. They're going to have to. And we need to make sure we have competition in it. I think that's how we're going to fix it. So I will tell you, it's been a joy to be here. I thank you for that. Council Bluffs, we had a great event there. We were in Winterset earlier, and then we met with a group of legislators, and now we're here, and I think I'm doing something with Joni Ernst in the morning. But this is what I'll tell you. I'm going to give you some facts to think about, right? The first fact is, whatever the polls tell you today, that is not where the polls are going to be a year from now. I promise you that. The second fact is that when I ran for the legislature against the longest serving legislator, they laughed at me. And I got to work and I earned the trust of the people of that district and won. When I ran for governor, I actually ran against an attorney general, lieutenant governor, a very popular congressman, and a state senator. I was Nikki who. Nobody knew who I was. And I worked that state and talked to as many people as I could, and they took a chance on me, and we won. When I went to the United Nations, they all said I didn't have the experience. And I got to work and took the kick me sign off of our back. I don't mind being underestimated. It makes me good. It makes me scrappy. It motivates me. What I want to know is that you'll have the courage too, to say maybe we deserve better. Maybe we're not going to listen to the pundits, and we're not going to listen to the politicos telling us what we should be thinking. And if you like what I had to say today, go tell 10 people. Go tell 10 people to go to NikkiHaley.com. If you didn't like what I had to say today, don't say anything. But more than that, I want you to have faith. Faith that we're going to be okay. I believe it. If there was ever a country in the world that could self-correct, it's us. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to know where up is. We're there. Now we need to finish the job. I can't do it by myself. I need every one of you to commit. Every one of you. And if we do that, our brightest days are ahead of us. Thank you very much. God bless you all. I appreciate it.